Hello and a warm welcome to Federal special program Capital Beat. It's a sad day for India because India's 14th Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, is no more. He died last evening at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, and his contribution to the development of India cannot be described in just a few words. His life was a reflection of honesty and simplicity. And of course, he will be always remembered as an honest man, a great economist, and a leader who dedicated himself to reforms. As an economist, he provided a lot of services to the nation during the challenging time. He also served as the RBI governor when he was finance minister in the cabinet of former PM and Bharat Ratna PV Narasimha Rao. He gave the country that was reeling under economic crisis a new direction in terms of the economy. But how does one remember the legacy of Dr. Manmohan Singh? Everybody and whoever has interacted with him or whoever has had the experience of interacting with him will have lots and lots of stories to share. But how does a nation remember him on a day like today? Joining me now is a very special panel, especially of people who've seen Dr. Manmohan Singh working very, very closely. First of all, I'd like to introduce Mr. Prem Shankar, who's the veteran journalist, author, economist, former advisor to Prime Minister VP Singh. And he has also some experience of interacting with Manmohan Singh when he was at Oxford. Thank you so much, Prem Shankar Jha, for joining. We have Anand Sahay, veteran journalist and political commentator. Thank you so much for joining. We have Professor Santosh Mehrotra, the renowned economist who was in the Planning Commission and has seen Manmohan Singh working very, very closely. Thank you so much for joining. We have Satendra Sahu, again, a veteran political commentator and who's written a lot on Manmohan Singh. Thank you so much for joining. And we have Srinivasan, who's the editor-in-chief of TheFederal. Thank you, Srini sir, for joining. And I'll begin with Prem Shankar Jha because he has a lot of fond memories of the time he spent with Manmohan Singh at Oxford. Prem, would you like to begin with those memories of, how you spent time with Dr. Manmohan Singh there?
Thank you, Neelu. I don't really think they're that important in view of what's happened and the wonderful life that he's led. But I did have the pleasure of meeting him on his first day in Oxford, when he came from Cambridge after having done his PhD to do a DPhil at Oxford. I happened to be, I was in my second year in undergraduate, thoroughly carefree and not very responsible towards my studies. So I was visiting a friend in Nuffield and I walked into a passage and he was walking out. And we almost collided with each other. And Indian to Indian, and there were only 90 of us Indians at that time in Oxford. It was an automatic something, automatically we began talking, and I took him for a walk around the parks and told him where the best laundry was, the best restaurant was, where the post office was, where the cinema house was, the one to go to, and then eventually ended back in Nuffield. But we kept in touch, but he's much older than me. And the difference between 21 and 28 is colossal, I assure you. So, but it was lovely. And then, of course, I met him in various ways all through the rest of our lives.
All right. We'll come back to you again. And I'd like to come to Professor Mehrotra now. That according to you, and of course, as an economist, what is the kind of legacy which Dr. Manmohan Singh has, left behind? Yes, Professor Mehrotra, can you hear me?
Sorry, did you ask me? I lost you for a.
Okay. No,
who are you asking?
I was asking you that as an economist, how would you remember Manmohan Singh?
Oh, it's a huge legacy. It's a huge legacy. There is just no question about it that he has left India a different country. There's no question about it that he left. He turned the economy around, an economy which he clearly understood needed to get a jolt and needed to be pulled out of what can I say, of a stage in its development which it should have long earlier outlived. In fact, one of the reasons why we are still way behind China is precisely because we allowed our economy to be stultified by the license permit Raj, and he was the architect of dismantling the license permit Raj. A great deal, and it's something that came naturally to him, which is understandable because he was such a scholarly prime minister. He was far and away the most scholarly prime minister this country has had and maybe will ever have. And of course, the contrast with recent times is just so stark. And then, of course, how kind and gentle and sophisticated in his dealings internationally as well as with politicians at home. All of that left a lasting impression of those of us who worked with him in the Planning Commission. Of course, I had the great opportunity to interact with him because he was the chairman of our Planning Commission. Montek Singh Ahluwalia was the deputy chairman at that time. And the it's not just his great contribution from 91 to 96 as finance minister. I think beyond that, most people don't fully understand and appreciate what a remarkable turn of events was the period between 2004 and 14. It is just still not even understood within the Congress party, I'm sorry to say, because it was the period of the fastest ever growth that we had. And it was the period of the fastest ever growth that we've had. And since then, the growth rate has come down dramatically. But it was not just that. It was a period of inclusive growth in the sense that we generated 7.5 million new non farm jobs each year over that period. And you could do that only because you had a phenomenal team led by an amazing mind as prime minister. I can't have imagined a team and a head of the team being of a higher caliber. We've not had that. We've never had that kind of caliber before, and such a joy because please remember, I came back from abroad. I didn't need to come back from abroad. I came back from abroad, giving up uh, a very cushy job in the UN system to join the Planning Commission as head of a division. And oh my God, it was the best decision of my life, I can tell you, primarily because of the kind of people I was surrounded by, headed by the and the fact that over that period, Nilu, from 2004 to 14, we grew not only at 7.8% per annum, unprecedented in our history, but we created jobs and we pulled workers out of agriculture. And as a result of all that, consumption rose and poverty fell for the first time in absolute terms. And I don't think Congress has understood the enormity of its own achievement because for the first time in India's history, by the Planning Commission's definition of poverty, we pulled 140 million people out of poverty. Who do you think was ultimately responsible for that? It's the Prime Minister and his team and the macroeconomic policies and the decisions that were being taken out of the Planning Commission. And all of this is not fully understood. So much so, and let me stop. I will stop in a minute with a personal anecdote. I have to tell you this. Because when I noticed that in the run up to the 2014 election result, I noticed that the Congress party was not actually going to town boasting of its achievements for the people of India. For the people, these are achievements of the people. And then I noticed 5 years later, in the run up to the 2019 elections, the Congress party was still not boasting of the achievements of 2004 to 14. I made it a point to actually, request a one-to-one meeting with Dr. Manmohan Singh because I would have wanted him to speak up. And he listened to me for a whole hour. One whole hour, he listened to me one-on-one on this matter. That, here are the achievements, here are the things that we could have said and we should be saying, and you must now speak up, sir. Told him. And you know what he said? Dr. Mehrotra, thank you very much, and it's very useful. Please send me a one-pager note. But I'm retired. And I felt so sorry that, look, with folded hands, asked him, "Sir, would you be so kind as to actually come out of retirement just for 1 month and make a few statements to this effect?" It would have been very simple. Unfortunately, once he had made up his mind, he didn't actually uh, make that statement. And I'm still so sorry about that. Back to you, Neelu.
Uh, I'll come to Anand now. Anand, there's a lot which has been said about the political legacy of Prime Minister. Though it's not a day to talk about all these things, but since everything started with that India against corruption campaign, how a campaign was built against a Prime Minister like Manmohan Singh. There were people who lampooned him, people caricatured him, and a lot of people today, I mean, even after his death today, are writing on the social media. And when they saw Prime Minister Modi today at his residence, those pictures were really moving and they brought back a lot of memories. What would you really say to the political legacy of a man who was called a silent prime minister, but then his somewhere his legacy is so loud?
Yes, his legacy is large, is he will be remembered for very, very long. And as he himself said, perhaps in a resigned fashion once, that history will remember him more kindly. And I think that's absolutely right. His achievements were truly remarkable, as Dr. Mehrotra just reminded us. Close to 8% growth on average per year for a decade. Now, that has not been seen in any democracy so far. China has exceeded that rate for a time. China is not a democracy as we know it. They have their own definition of a democracy. So that aside, that's one thing. Manmohan Singh also brought decency. He was not only a personally very decent man, he also brought public decency to the fore. That's very important. We can see the contrast not only with today, but also preceding periods. The decency that Manmohan Singh brought in dealing with not only his own party people, but also with those who sat on the opposition benches in the House. Courteous to the extreme. Understanding, he'll take your views on board. And I'm struck by two things. One is an article written only this morning by one of his two principal information advisors, Shri Harish Khare. Harish makes an important point that unlike the commonly held view, much of the commonly held view is held on the basis of WhatsApp-like messages transferred from one person to the next, or you see something written in a newspaper or somewhere and you pick it up. What Khare has very aptly called paperback pundits. The views of paperback pundits. Watching Manmohan Singh ji closely from nearby, he makes it very, very clear that this man, once he was, it is commonly thought that Sonia Gandhi decided and he followed it up, and there was a complete, I mean, on paper, structurally speaking, it was a diarchy, since he was the Prime Minister, held constitutional office, and Sonia the party leader. And Harish Khare says no to that. Once his mind was made up, he will do something, and he would not do anything which was only in the party's interest, or only in the interest of a few influential, powerful individuals. But only he decided what would be in the national interest. That's one. Two, the second point I would make is on the civil nuclear cooperation with the US. In the end, it's got us very little. The civil nuclear reactor, etc., was got ready, but it freed us of international isolation completely. And I believe that Sonia Gandhi, then president, powerful, influential leader of the Congress party, was not on the same side. He tended to view the whole nuclear question from a very different prism from him. Although he had Rahul Gandhi's support, the left threatened to walk out. And he said, do walk out if you have to. But Manmohan Singh did not budge. In his scheme of things, it was important that we get rid of the nuclear isolation. And we did. And I think it has brought many, many more benefits in international life than the civilian nuclear reactor. After all, even if you had the nuclear reactor, in the total energy mix, what you would get is about 5, 6, 7% of the national energy needs through nuclear power, and not more than that. So it has to be a mix of different sources of power. That's one thing. That's showing his complete firmness in his own mind about what is in the national interest and what is extraneous or extra dimensions to a conversation. So he was clear about that. And perhaps the last thing for you now before I step out is that he saw a line of peace, drawing a line of peace from Kabul to Islamabad, Lahore, to New Delhi, and then perhaps at a day not too far in the future, Dhaka. The old animosities with Pakistan, building a strong, powerful linkage with President Hamid Karzai of Afghanistan, who was also looking for a democracy in that country. It was not easy. Afghanistan is not India. I mean, it's not even Pakistan for that matter. There is no background in democracy. And yet he was working in that direction. And Manmohan Singh was very, very supportive. And in line with that, Manmohan Singh ji continued the Vajpayee effort in respect of Kashmir, trying and bringing people, many things that were promised were not fulfilled always. Because when you're dealing with a complex situation like Kashmir, there are roadblocks every inch of the way. But nevertheless, he did not give up. He kept trying. And I think a few right turns of the screw, if General Musharraf had not gone ahead and picked up a fight with the Supreme Court Chief Justice Iftikhar Ahmed and so on, maybe things could have been different. Although maybe I'm simplifying things. Maybe in the military structure of that country, it's not easy to strike a chord of peace with India. All that is possible. I'm not saying anything definitive, but the effort made on the part of India under Dr. Manmohan Singh, that is important. And you brought up to begin with when you asked me the question of that India against corruption. In my thinking, forgive me for saying this because some people may not agree with that. I think it was a total hocus pocus thing. There was corruption in the country then. There is corruption, extreme corruption today, and there is extreme corruption preceding Manmohan Singh's era. No, it wasn't that Manmohan Singh was, led a team that was the epitome of all corruption in India. I think the whole thing has to be looked at. All this big tamasha at that time. You see Manmohan Singh being forced to send senior ministers like Pranab Mukherjee to receive that bounder from the airport. What's the name? That yoga commercial guru, who's worth a few thousand crore rupees by now. His net worth. That man who ran away from that place wearing a Muslim woman's attire, the burqa. So that kind of thing, I think it was completely misguided on the part of government of India. And Manmohan Singh ji, I think, was put under great pressure, possibly by his own party, thinking that if they appeased these elements, that was a poor political judgment call, in my view. These were certainly, which could have been avoided. And India against corruption, the whole thing, the way it was built up, Lokpal and so on. Where are you hearing of Lokpal today? 10 years of the present government have gone by, and never heard of the Lokpal. Never heard of anything that were shouted about.
Yeah.
So,
Oh
yeah.
God, yeah.
So, I think on the whole, a very steady, stable 10 years with a very, very purposeful, sound rate of economic growth, with friendship with neighbors, a renewal of a good level of friendship with neighbors and difficult, and and all this done with great public civility.
Right.
You know,
No, absolutely,
I think
absolutely. In
that
fact,
that's more than what you can ask for in a democracy like what we have become now.
right, absolutely. I'll come to Mr. Sahu and then I'll come to Srini sir as well. Mr. Sahu,
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was listening to Anand very carefully and also what Professor Mehrotra and Prem Shankar Jha had to say. But do you think that, of course, history is going to judge him very kindly? That's for sure. But the political players within the political system, had they been very unfair to former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh? What is your feeling? I mean, the kind of things which he had to face. Were the players in the political system very unfair? Whether it was the opponents, I mean, that time it was BJP, which was at its peak, and shouting loud and hard against him. But were the political players unfair?
Uh, Thank you, Neeluji. In fact, I had the privilege of joining PMO as director. A month after, maybe a month or two after Manmohan Singh ji assumed office as Prime Minister. So I was director in PMO till 2009. So what I've seen from inside, I mean, I was, as a director, whatever role I was asked to play, I did play. So I tell you very frankly, in a political system, with a, anchored in parliamentary democracy, obviously the opposition will be harsh on the prime minister. We can't say that they should be considerate and soft on him. And given the polity, which was obviously boiling all the time, and now the boiling point has gone up, and polarization has taken place to a level which threatens the very integrity or unity of the country. So during his own time, they were obviously very sharply attacking him, and quite naturally they will attack. But then the graceful manner in which he conducted himself, assuming that yes, this is all given in a political system, that is the defining feature of the man. I mean, his humbleness, his humility was completely disarming. I mean, I have interacted a few times with him, one to one. It was completely disarming because my experience with Mr. K.R. Narayanan, as he was when he was president of India, and after that, I went back to Rajya Sabha Secretariat, and then from Rajya Sabha Secretariat, I was called to PMO, and it was a great experience. So, as far as criticism of the opposition or of the media, I think he took it on his stride. He said that is what it should be. Okay, and then but the defining aspect of Manmohan Singh's tenure was. Let me cite an example. From the early periods of my tenure in PMO. See, his first address to the nation on 15th August 2000 to 2004. Okay, so what I did, I suggested that let there be one quote from B.R. Ambedkar in Prime Minister's speech. Okay, now you see who is insulting Ambedkar. Modi, Prime Minister Modi, Home Minister Shah, he said Ambedkar, recitation has become a fashion. If they would recite the name of God, they will enter heaven for seven births and so on and so forth. But to justify Deg's appreciation of Ambedkar, they dig into the Congress history. Okay, but look at Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. You know, this is very contextual. That's why I'm flagging this point. So I suggested that let that famous line of Ambedkar be used in Prime Minister's speech to the nation from the ramparts of the Red Fort on 15th August 2004? What was the line? Line was Ambedkar famously said, "We would forgo material benefits, but not the right to education." Okay, then somehow when the draft was prepared, that was not there. But suddenly on 14th August, just a day before the Independence Day, I was asked, "Oh, Mr. Sahu, can you exactly give that quotation?" So I gave that quotation, and that was used. He said, "अम्बेडकर ने उन्होंने कहा था कि शिक्षा ऊपर इतना जोर देते थे कि उन्होंने बोला कि दलित भाइयों ने या बाकी सारे जो इतने डिप्राइव थे, वंचित थे, वो सारे लोगों के लिए शिक्षा इतना महत्वपूर्ण था, इतना it was so significant that they would forgo anything but not the right to education." Okay, so then same day when there was a discussion in a television channel, Mr. Prabhu Chawla, I don't know, he that time editor, or I mean, a very prominent media person. He said, what was the necessity for Prime Minister Manmohan Singh to quote Ambedkar? Ambedkar कब से शिक्षाविद हो गए? I was appalled. Okay, so again, when Mr. Manmohan Singh as Prime Minister was invited to unveil the statues of Gandhi, Ambedkar, and Nehru in the precincts of Kerala Assembly. So I suggested, sir, you use one line from Mr. K.R. Narayanan's famous, speech on Ambedkar. He said, if Nehru gave a moral purpose and mass dimension to freedom struggle, sorry, if Mahatma Gandhi gave a moral purpose and mass dimension to freedom struggle, Nehru gave a socialist and economic dimension, and Ambedkar gave a challenging social and democratic dimension. And Mr. Manmohan Singh, look at his intellect, his sensitivity to ideas. Immediately, he began his speech in Kerala Assembly by quoting President Narayanan, who hailed from Kerala. Okay, so the
Yeah.
point is, Mr. Manmohan Singh never said RSS in 1949, criticized constitution. RSS burnt the effigy of, Ambedkar or Nehru, and so RSS talked about Hindu Rashtra. No, nothing of that. So the dignity in which he upheld the,
Absolutely.
ideas of Ambedkar,
Yeah.
that actually, in the present context when Ambedkar Samman Yatra Char Taraf ho raha hai, and frankly speaking, what Amit Shah said, I wrote an article yesterday in the Wire. This is complete, offense to Ambedkar's vision. So it is
Right.
in this context, Neeluji, I'll just, like to flag the point here in this context that, see, I think it is obvious that he was the author of the economic reforms. He provided an opportunity for private sector to come up. Now, private sector is the engine of economic growth, but the kind of leadership he provided to save India from the global financial crisis which originated in US. That time, Joseph Stiglitz, the famous economist, he did praise Manmohan Singh. And that time, the governor of RBI is saying that luckily, India under Manmohan Singh did not deregulate banks. And Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, see, this is to be flagged. An author of the economic reforms, do you know what he said in numerous speeches as Prime Minister? It is due to the resilience of the public sector
Right.
enterprises and public
Okay.
sector banks. India was saved from the global financial crisis. So look at the
Right.
leadership. Somebody who, gave chance to private sector to come up. Now he is saying it is the resilience of the public sector enterprises and resilience of the public sector banks which saved India. So
Right.
therefore, he will be, he will be of enduring significance to deal with, the crisis that Modi regime has caused for the idea of India and for its very unity and integrity. So
Right.
that is
I'll
what.
come. Yeah, I'll come to Srini sir now. That there are people who believe that India can never have another Manmohan Singh, and do you think that he actually epitomized all the ideals of and the principles of an ideal prime minister, and those were the 10 years, the golden period where the aspirational level of the Indians was very very high. Socially, India was doing well. Economic growth was visible. So were those 10 period, I mean the 10 years, the best period which India saw under prime minister? And unfortunately that prime minister was criticized so much.
Thank you, Neelu. I think it's very interesting the question which you have posed, whether he would have been the best prime minister India ever had. Look, there is one thing. There are a lot of labeling about him. He's an accidental prime minister. There is a reluctant prime minister. I wouldn't believe in all of that. Yes, his entry into politics and then suddenly hoisted into the chair of prime ministership was very sudden. Nobody expected Sonia Gandhi to relinquish her post and then give it to Manmohan Singh. And there was I think there is a politics behind it as well. Obviously, Sonia Gandhi wanted to keep that seat with somebody who she completely relies for obvious reasons. And also politically maybe far more amenable. Maybe that's what the thinking would have been that time. But once having come into the chair, having assumed it, I think he conducted himself wonderfully. It will be completely, as an economist, somebody who was earlier with Prime Minister Narasimha Rao as his finance minister, he did a wonderful job. I think the two together changed the mindset. The biggest achievement, I would say, is the mindset that making money is not such a bad thing. Earlier there was such a feeling that
Yes.
people wouldn't talk about that, and
Yeah.
he in a way opened up. He opened up, the industrial policy resolution, this MRTP, monopoly restricted trade practices, the exim policy. You go on counting. There are so many reforms at that time. And as a reporter, I was covering those things. It was very exciting. Every day something new would roll out. And these are unimaginable. I was in a period where I was used to hearing constantly the rate of growth can't be more than 3.5 or 4 because, as
Yeah.
Raj Krishna famously said, the Hindu rate of growth. It was unbelievable, and we could actually defeat it. I would read Economist regularly and say, when will in the
Yeah.
last pages Indian economy will figure? We won't be there anywhere. So those are achievements, and it's not just growth that he brought in higher growth. Alongside, he also focused on poverty. I think Manrega is a brilliant concept where it kind of gave a safety net, and along with that, he also focused on social, emancipation. Social indicators certainly improved during his time. So, in that sense, and besides, I'm not even going into the fact that he gave certain dignity to the prime minister's office, and because of the decent man he was. Those are the good things. But as an economist, one expected that he would do, and he did it wonderfully. And he made a very brave statement. I was in Parliament when he gave that speech where he said famously, quoting Victor Hugo, that India's emergence as a major economic power was an idea whose time has come. Some of us thought, what is he saying? We are in the midst of such a huge foreign exchange crisis. We hardly have 2 weeks of forex left now, and he's making such a bold statement. And today, when leaders say that we are on the cusp of becoming global leaders, and we are soon become from fifth to third biggest economy and all, and nobody that time thought that the foundation which he was laying is that what it is going to lead to these things. And the other thing I would quickly cover is the scams. The so-called the 2G scam, the notional loss. I think it was one of the biggest, like Anand certainly said, kind of a fraud, he thought. Yeah, so the CAG report, I think the notional loss 1.76 lakh crore, which basically what was happening. Basically, the spectrum was being allotted, and the funds would have been collected later. But then a notional loss was shown, and it was made into a big scam, which of course A. Raja got into it, and then later he was, In 2017, I think he got out of the case. The other thing is, do we think that he wasn't a politician enough, that he was a technocrat PM, in that sense a very unique PM India ever had, and I wonder in that sense that whether we'll have any such PM in the future. That I really doubt. But was it his weakness that he was not a political person? I think in 1999, when the elections happened, it was, I think, by-election, and he contested from Delhi and he lost. And that time, the speculation was that his own party men were, kind of, against him. That's why it happened, and there was an internal sabotage. After that, he never actually contested any election. He came through Rajya Sabha. But then his biggest achievement in his second term, I think, is 123 agreement, the nuclear agreement, which actually made us, a partner in MTCR, this missile technology control regime, which has actually opened a lot of technologies for India. I think Boeing, if was willing to, invest here, there are a whole lot of other things that happened because of, this one strategic decision which was taken at that point of time. And I won't say he was not a politician at all, because he managed that despite left's very strong opposition. He kind of roped in Mulayam Singh, and then he could actually get the thing passed in the House. And then RTI Act. He was actually in favor of, I'm recalling this, that he was not in favor of making that act too strong, because, in some way it was detrimental. All kinds of files and things would go out. That was his logic. And also the amendment, the ordinance, which was actually famously torn by Rahul, which is actually protecting convicted lawmakers for immediate disqualification. I think these 2-3 acts are his political acts. He behaved as a politician would behave. So I'm sure if he continued, and if he for this thing, he would have been perhaps been a nice, good politician as well, not just an prime minister who weighed heavily in terms of economic decisions. Politically also, he would have taken a lot more. But unfortunately, I think the media and the opposition, which he himself pointed out, wasn't very kind to him. And hopefully now, after his death, people realize what he actually did.
Absolutely. And I'll come for the concluding comments now, quickly to Anand and Dr. Mehrotra and Mr. Sahu and Prem as well. But Anand, coming to you now, that as what Srini was just pointing out, a lot of comparisons are being made on the social media currently with Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. Now, when you compare the two, how would you bring in this comparison? If you could just do that comparison very briefly, if I may say.
Sorry, comparison where? Between which individuals?
Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. Comparison between Modi and Manmohan Singh. Because in those pictures being flashed this morning.
If I may say that this is grossly unfair to Dr. Manmohan Singh. Where is the comparison? Manmohan Singh tried to steady the ship of democracy on the financial economic front when the world was seeing a big crisis, and he stabilized the ship of state here, who is far-reaching, bold decision making at that time. That by giving sustained a secular trend of growth, which had not been seen before or since, and bringing about a quality of public decency, a culture of, broadly speaking, freedoms in the country. I chanced upon this morning by a tweet, now what's called X, by the actor Swara Bhaskar, who was then a student at JNU. And she recalls that there was a big protest against the Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, when he visited the JNU campus, and boys and girls were up in arms. Those on the extreme left, far left, they were showing him black flags. The Vice Chancellor rusticated two of them. And the next day, he received a request
Yes, sir.
from the PMO to say that please cancel that order. After all, students also have the right to express themselves. So
Right.
that's public decency for you, upholding of public freedoms. And I
Right.
think, people far better versed in public affairs than myself, like Prem here, who's our
Yeah,
elder
in fact, I want
statesman,
to claim somehow.
if I may say that. I mean, he would uphold that. Public decency is freedom of expression and a steady, fairly good, steady, sound rate of growth without
So I interrupt you because we
inequalities
have,
running
yeah.
amok.
Anand, sir, I'll just interrupt you because we are really short on time. Very brief comments I want from others as well. Prem,
Yes, yes,
I
yes.
come to you, Prem Shankar Jha, that, I mean, I was looking at, I mean, there have been it's been like an outpouring on the social media with comparisons between Modi and Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, especially when those pictures were flashed this morning when he went to pay his condolences. And people last evening on the social media were wondering whether Prime Minister Modi would go, whether he would not go. Given the fact that a little comparison, Sitaram Yechuri died a short while back, I mean, just a few months ago, and we didn't see Prime Minister Modi going there. But then today was an opportunity where he actually has shown some kind of tolerance. He's come out of that image that he's much more than what we thought. So what would you really say to that? Yes,
Well,
Prem.
I mean, first and foremost, comparison between Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Manmohan Singh is a comparison between night and day. I repeat that, it's a comparison between night and day. It's a comparison between a person, Manmohan Singh, who respected all his colleagues in parliament, all the norms of decency all his colleagues in the cabinet, all the norms of decency in parliament, and who first thought always of the people and almost never about himself, who thought that without consensus, no decision can be made enduring. Therefore, he was prepared to hold back even on his strongest desires as prime minister until he had got the necessary consensus within his party. Completely an extraordinary man. Modi is the absolute exact opposite. He orders, and God help those who, even within his close circle, who don't listen to him. Every single institution of government that Manmohan Singh strengthened is being systematically destroyed. Well, we talk about corruption in politics. What about the corruption of the electoral bonds? What about the corruption of Form 7, the best use of Form 7 to get to in the election thing, election commission's Form 7, to put lists of, you are allowed to say in Form 7, and I've read it, that such a person is no longer alive or has moved, therefore you should take him off the list. But this form has been used with thousands of names attached, and the election commission has removed all those names. So this idea that you can put a list of names to the Form 7 is a unique development of Mr. Modi's government, and it's being used systematically to destroy the last pillar of democracy, which is the electoral system itself. The Supreme Court has already gone. The judges of the High Court, the good ones, always recuse themselves in political cases. If you look at the bureaucracy has been totally eaten up by a combination of sheer fear, of Mr. Modi and the BJP, and of course they need to keep their job and keep their lives secure. No, let me finish. As I've had a very long time, I want a bit more time, no matter what, how little is left for the others. These are things that you really do. There's just no comparison between the two. I stop right here. Go ahead.
Okay, no, you wanted to say something else. I believe you said that.
No. I'd much rather hear the others.
Okay. I'll come to Professor Mehrotra. Now again, this comparison being made, and I want to stick to that point. The social media, and there was a tweet by Anupam Kher also this morning where he said that I was surprised to hear this news that Prime Minister Manmohan Singh is not there in the world now. And then he had played the role of Prime Minister Manmohan Singh in a Bollywood movie. And the moment he put out that tweet, he was trolled left, right, and center that you are being unfair, you lampooned that prime minister. And this is the kind of, the narrative was seen on the social media. What would you really say now, very briefly?
Neeru, if you don't mind, I want to go back to my assessment of Dr. Manmohan Singh as an economist. That's what he was.
Yeah.
And if you, with your permission, may I do that?
Yes.
Because there are things that I want to say that were not said and need to be said. And I will draw the comparison to you. So hear me out. One, let's just remind ourselves that there was a global economic crisis in 2008. The way that economic policy response, the fiscal policy response, the monetary policy response was designed to pull us out of the crisis within 2 quarters. It's an unbelievable achievement. It's an unheard of achievement under the current government. And I'm doing the comparison that you want us to do. Under this government, we went into a contraction of the economy, which was twice as bad as the global economy's contraction after COVID. Why? Because of the quality of the economic policy decision making. Let us not forget these hugely important decisions which matter to the lives of each of one of us. If we had continued the growth rate that we had managed to achieve over that period, we would be the third largest economy now. Thirdly, since this government came to power, the millions have gone back to agriculture. 80 million workers have gone back to agriculture. Why? Because non-farm jobs are not being created. Under that government, under Dr. Manmohan Singh, because of the profundity and the balance of the economic policy decision making that affected lives. Let's not talk about individuals here. That affected lives. It meant people were pulled out of agriculture for the first time in India's history. People do not know these facts. They don't know these facts. That for the first time, the absolute number of workers in agriculture fell. That was the reason the labor market tightened in the rural areas. Not just because of Manrega, which was a wonderfully important thing to do at that point, but also because jobs were being created, and that was the reason why poverty fell. We pulled 140 million people out of poverty. Why? Because of the kind of decisions that were being taken by that government, headed by the Prime Minister. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Sahu, again on this comparison bit, and this comparison is very natural, I think. I mean, earlier, I thought that, I don't know whether it's unfair to discuss this, but then a lot of comparisons are being made because of the kind of criticism the Prime Minister had faced. Not that the opponents should not speak, but then somewhere there is a feeling deep down that, those 10 years, everyone, it seemed, was unfair to Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. Yes, Mr. Sahu, very briefly.
You see, you can't compare the hills with the rivers. So similarly, here you see somebody can be, now the contrast is quite revealing on its own, without saying a word. Look at the manner in which very truthful statements were made by Dr. Manmohan Singh. Can one at that time say that Mr. Manmohan Singh was telling lies? And look at what his successor has done. So the comparison is obviously, the famous line is that comparison is odious. But here in this case, it's all two different things. So, there is a statesman, a leader, a humble man, he stood out in every aspect. See, let me tell you, I was working in PMO. Mr. Punab Chatterjee, he was additional secretary or joint secretary. He told us when he went to the World Bank on a deputy, for a new assignment, he said it was the instruction of the Prime Minister Manmohan Singh that, in PMO, there should be tension-free atmosphere. Every officer was given enough opportunity to express views. I remember one officer was there. Do you know what he said? What is this Rajiv Gandhi Gramya Vidyut Karan Yojana? Why not Pradhan Mantri Yojana like Vajpayee did? So he was a little more pro Vajpayee. Then somebody, went and said, how come that officer is still continuing here in the PMO? And Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, I got to know that he said, no, he must be there. That is his personal view. Let him be there. You see, look at this. I was a part of the PMO, where one fellow in the lunch club, he will say all good things about Vajpayee and bad things about Manmohan Singh. But he continued, and apparently he was sent in a good posting also. So
Right.
this is the leadership. This is within bureaucracy. Now, do you know in PMO, when I called somebody, he said, no, we can't talk. So that fear element, doctrine of faithfulness which is prevailing in India was not there at all.
Right. All right.
So the constitution prevailed.
Yes.
The civil liberties prevailed. And media was so critical of him. Where is that media now?
Absolutely.
So what comparison
That's
one
true.
talks about?
Yeah,
He stands as a role model, for everybody. And role model is high above all others. As simple as that.
Yes. Shri sir, what would you like to say towards the end, and we'll just close the program then? Yes. Sir, you're muted. Yeah.
In my view, social media is pretty vain. I mean, I won't even go there. I mean, they become excessively critical. They'll suddenly be very euphoric. I don't think we need to take that into consideration when we are, discussing a topic like this on a day when he's no more. But there are issues which still there. I think I wish probably if Manmohan Singh was consulted, even if he wasn't PM, he would have given some sage advice on some of these issues. Poverty is still there. It is not completely eliminated. I mean, it should have been gone by now, but it hasn't. The disparity has increased. You look at, richer getting richer and poor are there. I mean, that disparity hasn't reduced. In fact, it is increasing. Unemployment has gone up. So, so we are now staring at a new technology regime. I mean, artificial intelligence hasn't even come to our shores as speedily as it has, as the conversation elsewhere are. And we are very much dependent on a big chunk of our revenues from IT-enabled services, SaaS, and all those kinds of things. And therefore, these are again the industry. So these are very important things. I mean, I wish some of these strategic decisions, are handled better. And I'm sure if we had a sage advice of economists like him, we would have certainly benefited. So I would, since it's the last word, I would conclude. In my lifetime, I don't think I will see another technocrat PM or such a man like this. At least that much I can say. I don't know what will be in the future.
Absolutely. I think Prem Shankar Jha wants to say something. He raised his hand. Yes, sir.
One last sentence, and I will not take any more time. In Dr. Manmohan Singh's time, for a decade, we had 8% growth, of which industry contributed 9 to 10% per year. In Modi's time, they have claimed approximately 7% growth. I have some doubts about that, and so do other very important economists. But whatever that growth is, it's entirely in the service sector. Now, anybody who's an economist knows that services sector data can be easily inflated, and also they're in any case very difficult to calculate. So the real growth of this country took place during, as Dr. Mehrotra has said, in Manmohan's time, and employment growth has stopped, and you shouldn't look at GDP at all. You should be looking only at employment to see whether we are doing better or not.
Thank you so much for joining. I'll have to close the program. Prem Shankar Jha, Anand Sahay, Mr. Sahu, Srinivasan, thank you very much for joining.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.